morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday and welcome into FreightWaves Now. We're excited to have you. I'm Kaylee Nix here with Anthony Smith.
That's right. On today's episode, we'll get to chat about two Celedon executives and a cover-up scheme. We'll also have to chat with Tony Mulvey and talk about the Research Corner in the second hour. But first, we have our top story, which talks about parcel volumes dropping in the air cargo arena. And our air cargo editor, Eric Kulisch, is here to talk about it. Eric, thanks so much for being here this morning.
It's great to have you as always, Eric, and let's dig right into it. I think that it's no shock that we know that air cargo volumes continue to see a decline. This time in the parcel segment, what's going on with the numbers? All right, it looks like we are having a little bit of audio issues this morning from Eric Kulisch, but that's okay. We will get it all sorted out. Head on over to the wall. We've got our first carrier update with Tony and Donnie. I think we can hear those guys.
I unfortunately can't.
Let's toss it over.
Welcome into this carrier update. Donnie, going to start here this morning talking about one of my favorite maps within Sonar. Our weighted rejection index kind of gives an idea of where capacity is changing in a meaningful way.
Correct. So when I look at this map, it's change. But it's significant change because, we have markets that are changing, but it might be a very, very low volume market where rejection rates have gone from 2 to 20%. Well, it could just be a very small number of loads getting rejected, and it looks really big. But it's Fargo, North Dakota, and it may not even matter. Versus something like a Dallas or a Memphis or an Atlanta. So this is why I like to look at this map, and we're looking for the darker blues or the darker reds. And obviously looking here today, knowing that what kind of market sets trends are going on right now, this map is very blank. And we see, a few reds. We see Columbus, Nashville, and a darker red Houston. So I'm going to get away from this map right now because it's not telling me a lot. So we go to the next chart here, and I bring up the same data, but I bring it up on a heat map. Now, looking at this map right here, I can very easily sort it by value. And here I've got it sorted by the highest values, same exact map over here, sorted by the lowest values. So I start up over here and I look at it. Charlotte, North Carolina, 3.017. Greenville, South Carolina, 2.64. Jacksonville, 1.85. Denver, 1.63. I'm looking for numbers that are 4 and above, and I don't have any. So there's no real significant changes in the positive direction that I'm looking for, showing maybe markets that are tightening up. So no good here. I come over here and look at this side, and I see Houston, Texas, negative 6.02. Nashville, Tennessee, negative 4.55. Columbus, Ohio, negative 4.06. And I've got 3 right here that are below negative 4. And that's kind of where I'm drawing that line again. So I've got 3 markets that are actually significantly changing, just in the wrong direction. These markets are deteriorating rapidly. So these might be markets I want to look up or investigate further and possibly avoid depending on what situation I'm in.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is one that I've looked at recently more, just because in the map itself, you haven't seen a lot of change because rejection rates are so low really across the board that there hasn't been these significant swings one way or another from week to week. This could give you an idea. I mean, I look here, right? Like at Denver, it's increased by what? It's gone from, it was negative yesterday to a positive number, and it's moving that way. So it's something to kind of at least give you an idea of, hey, this is an area that might be changing in that direction.
And also an easy trigger for this is the fact that it's green. Green means it's going positive direction. Red means it's going in the negative direction. So you can easily pick this out just by what color is on these maps. Now let's pop in here right quick and let's look at Houston. Let's see why is this telling us that Houston is a bad market? Well, we see volumes here. Volumes have come down slightly here in blue since the beginning of February. Not too bad. Nothing to be overly concerned about. But it's these green line right here. This rejection rates that were over 5% here and have dropped down to 2.69%. This is a significant change because of the size of this market, and it's showing that it's deteriorating rapidly.
Yep, absolutely. Donnie, thank you so much for this update. We'll be sure to check in with you again a little later. Right now, we'll hand it back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
All right, guys, thank you for that carrier update. I think that we've got Eric and everything all sorted out now. So we're going to move back into this conversation about parcel volumes in air cargo. Eric, let's break it down a little bit by the numbers. What are we seeing as far as volume declines go?
Well, I think specifically what happened, what I reported yesterday was that one of Amazon Air's largest contract airlines, Air Transport Services Group, put out some guidance for 2023 and basically said that Amazon is, reducing or not renewing some leases on some aircraft potentially, and also cutting back its flight time. And interestingly, they noted that DHL, another of their large customers, is also cutting back flight time. So ATSG is an interesting company because they have lots of fingers and lots of buckets, and so they lease. They have a division that leases aircraft to airlines that want to fly them themselves. Then they also bundle that with crews and maintenance for carriers or people like Amazon that don't really have a true airline of their own, and they'll fly those leased planes on their behalf. So basically, there's about 12 Boeing 767-200s, a dozen of them that are coming off lease. It looks like Amazon's going to renew 4 of them. 3 of them are aging out with, limitations on their airframe fatigue. So those will be scrapped. And but the other 8, it looks like, Amazon could still potentially renew, but it looks like they probably won't when those leases expire later this year. And then they're, reducing the amount of flight time that these planes will be, the existing remaining planes will be in the air. Now, ATSG, their airlines have about 49 other aircraft, 767-300s that they continue to fly for Amazon. So they fly a lot of planes, but some of those aircraft utilization will be down. And that's just a function of the e-commerce sales. Amazon's been cutting back on all kinds of things. They've stopped building warehouses, new warehouses at a rapid pace. They've let go of 18,000 people. And, last year they started cutting back on their, Amazon Air cut back on their flights, growth, not cutting back on flights, but they were growing at a rapid pace. They dialed it back. Now they're going from no growth to actually, cutting back some. So that's basically what's going on.
And Eric, in terms of the slowdowns that we're seeing from Amazon, are we seeing them also take these same actions across the globe? We're thinking about Europe and other areas.
That's a good question. I haven't heard about Europe. This was U.S. Centric. These 767s operate only in the U.S., so it's possible they could be dialing back their aircraft utilization some in Europe, where they have a much smaller fleet, contract fleet.
So, Eric, how much of this can be relatable to the fact that for Amazon and a lot of the e-commerce merchandising and e-commerce products that they offer, a lot of it is probably situated really well already for middle and final mile delivery. So you're not necessarily having to rely on air cargo to make these big transport moves anymore, right? Warehouses are full. We still have really rising inventory levels growing at a fast rate. Does that have to do with a lot of it that now their inventory is where they need it, so they don't necessarily need the air cargo capacity to move it?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a function of a couple things. The inventories are higher from either themselves or some of the sellers that use their platform, and there's just less demand. Consumer spending's down a fair amount right now, so people have used up a lot of their COVID savings, and inflation is still high. So those are kind of the factors, and so they just don't need those extra costs right now. They're trying to reduce them, so the flight time's coming down. I will say also it was interesting that when another contract carrier, Sun Country Airlines, which a lot of people might know for flying to beaches and other leisure areas, they fly a dozen of these smaller 737-800 converted freighters for Amazon, and they had their earnings last week, and they also said, their block hours or their time in the air has come down slightly, but they don't expect it to come down too much because, these contracts that Amazon has have kind of a minimum floor. Like the Amazon has to pay for the aircraft regardless of how much they're used. So it's just that excess flying that these airlines were getting before is being dialed back some.
And Eric, with the Sun Country story, and really some that dial back, as you mentioned, with Amazon, where does labor fit into all this? I know we're sometimes talk about that really kind of hitting into margins. Is this still a variable or a factor here?
Well, I mean, labor is impacting the air cargo sector overall, whether it's Amazon or Sun Country, especially at the airports where there's ground handling issues. So I don't know in this particular case whether there's a labor component. I think the pilot contracts for these two airlines are okay, but in the broader arena, there's a lot of pilot contracts at airlines still being hammered out. I think one of the major airlines just renegotiated one of its contracts with the pilots. We're waiting to hear if they're accepted. And then you've got ground handling issues at airports. So, but in this particular case, I don't think that those were necessarily factors.
And then, of course, we know that Amazon and Hawaiian Airlines just signed that pretty big deal, which, of course, is going to incur some pretty high costs for Hawaiian, especially on the labor side. How do we see this now type of fitting? How does this kind of fit into the broader picture, knowing that we have that big deal on the table, but we see Amazon struggling with their parcel capacity to fill it?
Yeah, no, great. I really appreciate you bringing that up. I forgot to mention Hawaiian Airlines, plays into this news yesterday, which was interesting. So Air Transport Services Group pretty much explained this loss of some of these aircraft that are, not going to be, these leases that are not going to be renewed by Amazon as, due to these economic headwinds, which is true. And Amazon doesn't need all the planes. But left unsaid was also that Amazon has this new deal with Hawaiian Airlines to fly a different type of plane. The Airbus A330-300 is slightly larger than the 767. Hawaiian's going to fly 10 of them. A couple of them will enter the fleet later this year, and more come on next year. And those are supposed to be replacements for 767s that come off of expiring leases. So some of that lost business from ATSG, is partially due to, the switch to these Hawaiian aircraft.
And Eric, before we let you go, can you tell us about the Burrell Aviation story?
Great. Burrell Aviation, most people probably haven't heard of them, but they're a fast-rising privately held investment firm that is going to be making some noise pretty soon in developing infrastructure for regional airports, these secondary airports that are getting spillover cargo in the last couple of years because the major airports are so congested, don't have labor, trucking companies have to wait days to pick up freight. And these secondary airports, you can just fly in on the ramp, you can get airside service right away and have those shipments unloaded and out in a few hours. So Burrell but the problem is a lot of these secondary airports just don't have the public funding, the resources to build any cargo infrastructure. So Burrell is kind of jumping the gun and going to airports, rounding them up and saying, we'll finance that. We'll put it together, we'll bundle a package, we'll finance it, we'll build it, we'll operate them and, just give us a big master ground lease for 30 or 40 years. And so they have these concession agreements, and soon they'll be starting to invest in these airports. They just hired a former Southwest Airlines executive to help bring in airlines and forwarders to these airports, kind of attract them in. And they've also talked, interestingly, about starting their own private airline to connect these airports with the hubs and, have this kind of expedited scheduled express service. So that'll be interesting, too. That's a little down the road, but definitely a company to keep an eye on.
Definitely will. And of course, we'll check in with you for more updates around this. And Eric, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks a lot, Anthony and Kaylee.
Awesome. Right now, we're going to toss it over to Kaylee for our first look at today's top stories.
Thanks, Anthony. Here's a look at what's making headlines this morning on FreightWaves.com. TFI International Chairman, President, and CEO Elaine Bedard said yesterday that the company is not in discussions for a merger or acquisition with U.S.-based LTL carrier ArcBest, even though TFI owns a small percentage of ArcBest shares. Bedard said that the holdings represent a strategic investment for TFI as it purges some of the unprofitable U.S. LTL business acquired when it bought UPS Freight in 2021. Bedard also said that ArcBest is the first company TFI would consider selling terminal land to if it came to that investment. The benchmark diesel price fell yesterday, following in line with recent declines in futures and wholesale prices. The price fell 8.3 cents per gallon after 2 weeks of back-to-back increases and settled at $4.53. This is about 60 cents higher than the price was this time last year. Diesel markets have completely fallen into restrictions on Russian diesel and other refined products as of Sunday, including a European price cap on diesel of $100 per barrel. And intermodal drivers and their companies operating in LA, Long Beach, Memphis, Savannah, and Chicago have secured a win against ocean carriers with a decision from the Federal Maritime Commission. The decision rules that the exclusive agreements between carriers and chassis providers violate U.S. Shipping Act when an agreement limits carriers to not use a chassis of its own choosing. The lawsuit has been in the FMC hands since August of 2020, which was brought forward by the American Trucking Association's Intermodal Motor Carriers Conference against a national chassis pool operator and 11 ocean carriers. And you can find those stories and more on FreightWaves.com and in the FreightWaves app. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe to stay updated. And head on over to tv.freightwaves.com for pieces of today's show and any other show that you might have missed here on FreightWaves TV. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back with our first check of weather. The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
Welcome to Drilling Deep. I'm your host, John Kingston. Drilling Deep is the place where we talk about oil and we talk about diesel, and you have to drill to get oil and you have to get oil to make diesel, so that's why we call it Drilling Deep. Drilling Deep drops every Friday on FreightWaves TV and all available podcast platforms.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now on this Tuesday morning for our first check of the weather. Continuing to look at some pretty nice conditions across the eastern half of the United States today. A little less sun, a little more filtered clouds, but honestly overall not too bad, especially when you factor in the nice temperatures for the southeastern parts of the U.S. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events right now. We've got the satellite presentation up on the map, and we can kind of see where our next weather maker is going to start developing across central Texas and Oklahoma with those higher clouds. We've got some high clouds making their way across Tennessee and up towards the Ohio River Valley as well, but really nothing precipitation-wise to worry about. We've got this area that is a D2 severe weather outlook, which we'll talk about in our next weather update. But before that, we've got more sunshine and warmer temperatures on the way across these areas. Filtered sun today all the way from central Texas across the southeast up through Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. But really a pretty nice day on the way. Light breezes, feeling like springtime out there as well, with high temperatures getting into the mid to upper 60s. Some 70s across central parts of Mississippi and Alabama, even some 80s, some mid to upper 80s along the Gulf Coast beaches there. Not gonna lie, I would take being down at the beach today in the 80s. But overall, going to be a pretty nice week for us here across the eastern half of the country. We are going to be watching our next disturbance kind of set up across central Texas and Oklahoma, as I mentioned. That's mainly going to be a rainmaker with a possibility of some severe weather as a cold front drapes in behind it. But we'll talk about that coming up later on. And some more precipitation coming to the Pacific Northwest as well, looking up to set up for the latter half of the week. We'll continue to talk about weather as we move through the rest of your show today. Right now, we're going to toss things over to Christian Thomas. He has our first check of the social roundabout.
Thanks, Kaylee, for that weather update. We'll get back to weather later on in the show. Right now, this is Social Roundabout, and I'm Christian Thomas. I want to talk about a TikTok that I found recently that has gained a lot of traction and definitely become a little more popular and trending on social media. Let's take a look at this one TikToker who has shared his phone number on one of those bumper stickers that says, "How's my driving? Call this number." Let's see what he does with those people when they call.
I made "How's my driving" bumper stickers with my phone number on them. You guys have been putting them on your vehicles, and I've been taking the calls.
They were going the speed limit. It's supposed to be the passing lane. He was just sitting in the left lane like he was taking a drive to Sunday dinner.
Okay, that's a Class 3 complaint, so we do take those seriously. Did you happen to get the license plate by any chance?
No, I barely had time to get this number. The vehicle, it was like a plumbing vehicle.
Okay, say no more. We do keep a record of most companies that register. It's an opt-in program, so do you mind me putting you on hold while I search for that?
Yeah, sure.
Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. What the neighbors would say if the punters arrived in the street. When Mr. and Mrs. Dursley woke up on the dull grey Tuesday, they didn't see the owls swooping.
Okay, thank you for holding. I have good news. Turns out there's only one driver it could be. We contacted the company, and we are going to escalate this.
All right, sounds good.
I just need to put you on hold briefly again.
Yeah, that's right. He's sitting there playing the audiobook to Harry Potter. He's really funny. That TikTok goes on, and I've seen a few where he even plays some music like Free Bird and Celine Dion, My Heart Will Go On. It's quite hilarious to watch. Now, changing it up a bit, today is National Periodic Table Day. So chemists, get excited, right? National Periodic Table Day is a day that celebrates the first periodic table that was published back in 1863, created by English chemist John Newlands. Back then in 1863, there were 56 elements. Now there's 118. And you know what, Kaylee, Anthony, I'm a big jokester. I like a lot of jokes. And I used to tell chemistry jokes periodically, but I had to stop. I couldn't get a good reaction. Maybe we should just take chemistry jokes and bury them.
Stop. Right. Stop it. That was a good one. That was a good one.
Kaylee, Anthony, take it away.
You know, I got to let my nerd show a little bit on periodic table day. I used to have the whole periodic table memorized in order.
I never memorized any of it, and I did the bare minimum to get by in my science classes.
There's a song about it. Maybe one day I'll sing it for you.
We need that. We need that ASAP. We need that
It's
today.
going to be that exclusive FreightWaves content. You guys subscribe to get it. But thanks, Christian, for that. We'll talk to you a little bit later on in the show. Right now, we're going to welcome back Noi Mahoney. He joined us yesterday. This time, a different conversation, talking about two former Celedon executives, what's going on with their settlement. Noi, thanks for joining us again.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Well, former Celedon trucking executives Eric Meek and Bobby Peevler have reached an agreement with the Securities and Exchange Commission in an alleged accounting fraud case related to the Celedon bankruptcy in 2019. The SEC accused the two men of devising an alleged scheme to hide tens of millions of dollars in losses with the company. You know, when Celedon went bankrupt, it was the largest truckload carrier in history to file for bankruptcy. At the time when it closed, it had about 2,700 trucks in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, as well as 4,000 employees, including about 3,000 truck drivers.
And Noi, was this really essentially a case of them looking to try to defraud the government?
I don't know the specifics. I hadn't read the whole case file, but it is related to, they were trying to hide, allegedly, they were trying to hide losses related to, Celedon. And the SEC had accused them of devising this scheme where they were selling trucks at overinflated prices through a joint venture with another company and one of their subsidiaries. It was very convoluted, but basically the SEC had accused them of trying to hide these losses. And the SEC civil case, there was another criminal case with the Department of Justice that was also recently dismissed back in August, and it was related to these same charges. So both men, the SEC reached a settlement in their civil case with these two men, and the Department of Justice, the U.S. Department of Justice, dismissed the criminal charges against these two men back in August.
Can you talk a little bit about what the settlement looks like as far as money goes? Are we talking, well, this is a civil suit, so there's no criminal penalties, no criminal jail time involved, but what does the monetary settlement look like now?
You know, I was wondering that. It's not, the settlement details of it are not in the court filings. So I called the lawyers for both men, the law firms that were representing them, and they declined to comment. And I reached out to the Securities and Exchange Commission yesterday to see if I could find out any more, and they also declined to comment. So it's unclear at this time what the settlement was, if it involves, penalties or fines or anything at all. So it's unclear at this point.
So with this, Celedon was obviously a case to be made an example of, and now the bankruptcy has gone on for a while, for 4 years, since 2019. We're at this kind of inflection point almost in the freight markets where I think if we were to see another large truckload carrier like Celedon potentially go bankrupt, a lot of it would have to be due to mismanagement, right? And management maybe not aligning with the way that the market is, with their strategic goals. Do you think that the Celedon case has kind of set an example across the industry for these large truckload carriers for what not to do if bankruptcy were to become them?
Yeah, the Celedon case is interesting because of this civil, the civil accusations brought by the Securities and Exchange Commission, as well as the criminal filings or charges brought against these two men. And it's one of the more unusual cases I've seen involving a trucking company this large. And, it was this weird perfect storm where these criminal and civil charges came about at almost the exact same time that the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So I'm not sure we'll ever see a situation like that again. I think, as you mentioned, maybe these trucking companies and other large companies are sort of put on notice that, the SEC and the Department of Justice does pay attention to this kind of stuff. And, if there are executives out there who are allegedly trying to do stuff, I should say that, both of these men were cleared of all charges. So, but if there are things going on out there that might not be on the up and up, maybe the authorities are paying attention.
And with these two men settling now, are there any other outstanding items from Celedon, or is this pretty much the end of everything that we're seeing from that downfall?
I believe there is still one more ongoing case related to Celedon. Now, it doesn't involve, it involves a company that was part of this alleged scheme to sell trucks. I think it was either a company in a joint venture with Celedon, or it might have been one of Celedon's subsidiaries. I'd have to look that up. But there is still an ongoing case where I believe a person has pled guilty to these charges, but I'll have to double check that.
So now with them going forward, the two former executives, do they just have to pay the sum out for their settlement, or do they now walk free and they're able to go and do as they please?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's unclear if there was any a monetary fine or penalty. But at this point, you know, the Department of Justice has cleared them of all criminal charges with prejudice, which means no charges related to this case can ever be brought against them again. So they are free and clear of criminal charges. And with this, you know, SEC settlement, it seems like they're also clear of the civil case is also done. So these two men have basically, you know, they can walk free without, you know, anything that can be brought back against them.
And Noi, of course, we talk about them, the Celedon case really kind of being used as an example to be made out of. With them really kind of being able to walk free, does this really kind of potentially open up the door for some other potential foul play, or do you think that this was just such an extreme and unique case here?
You know, you can never say never with the with when you have companies this big and this much money. It's hard to say, you know, what could happen, but it definitely was a perfect storm, like I mentioned earlier about, you know, the bankruptcy, the Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and these criminal and civil charges. I would be surprised if it happened in a similar way as Celedon, you know, but you can never say never. It's such sometimes truth is stranger than fiction.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, Noi, thank you for keeping us updated with this story. Anything else that you're working on for the week right now?
I am working on an update of cargo theft here across the U.S. and California and Texas lead as usual. So I'll be putting out a report on that sometime this week.
Awesome. No, we'll definitely be checking for that story, and thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We'll be right back with another check of weather in just a few minutes.
like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
coming.
Hey everybody, this is Thomas Watson, enterprise trucking carrier expert here at FreightWaves, telling you about my show, Loaded and Rolling. Now, it involves trucking topics for large carriers and even small ones that wish to be large. Anything that impacts trucking, you can get it there. You can catch us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern on tv.freightwaves.com. We do it live.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. In this carrier update, Donnie, gonna look here at a table we probably haven't brought up. We brought it up a couple times, but not that often, but it's our looking at the volatility in these markets, and you can look at it across really 4 different indice levels in one chart.
So this is our most volatile markets page. And the reason I'm bringing this up here right now is because it's hard to find, it's really difficult to find these markets using maybe the WRI. You saw it was very blank. So now let's kind of break it down by these 4. And these are the 4 core indices that we use. Basically outbound tender volumes, outbound rejection rates, the head haul index, and tender lead times. So what we do is we've taken these markets and we kind of look at their average over the last year. And then we look at the volatility of are they operating within range of that average, within 1 standard deviation, 2 standard deviations, or are they outside of that? So if it's 1 standard deviation above that average, we'll call it a moderate increase. Yep. If it's 2 above, we may call it a strong increase. If it's 1 below, a moderate decrease, or maybe 2 standard deviations below the average there, we'll call it a strong decrease. Now, I like to scroll through these. And also another good issue with this page is it gives you the market and it gives us the index code that we use as well. So I like to scroll through here and I like to look for 3 greens. There are not 3 greens on any of these markets in here and over the last few weeks, Tony. It's been real tough. But I can still revert back and look at 2 that are green and just kind of find those markets that maybe I need to watch out for. See what's going on. Showing 2 greens, maybe this is an upcoming market that I definitely need to watch for. And I brought this up as an example here, Memphis. We got a moderate increase on their outbound rejection rates, and we have a moderate increase on tender lead times. Well, rejection rates show that maybe pricing pressure could be pushing upwards.
Yep.
Outbound tender lead times, that says that carriers could be under pressure.
Yep.
I mean, shippers could be under some pressure here. So the 2 kind of work, these 2 are working in the same direction, showing that maybe out of Memphis, there's some upward pressure on pricing. So this is one reason I really like this map. And of course, you can go through and see what other markets here. Kansas City shows upward pressure here on rejection rates. Let's go in here and see on the next chart here, we're going to bring up Memphis here. And I got our outbound tender rejection rates here in blue, the first one we looked at here, and it's up to 9.15%. Which is well above the average that's below 4%.
Yeah.
It's more than double. So this could be, this is positive. And then I look at our dry van outbound tender lead times, and they're at 3.02%. Well, the average is about 2.5. So they're about a half a day ahead. They're having to book their loads a half a day ahead in Memphis. So this is definitely going to be maybe one of the markets I bring up on our lanes today, because of the information that I'm gathering from this most volatile markets page.
Yeah, and I look at this, I look back, because we have it pulled up for the last month, and I mean, you're talking, we were at around 6% there in the middle of January, now we're up to 9, so I mean, you're talking 300 plus basis point move there to upward pressure on pricing. We were at about under 3 days during that same time, now we're over 3 days. Shippers are feeling a little bit of pressure. Guess what? It's a positive out of the Memphis market to be able to push those rates higher.
So this is just one more key indicator of trying to find those markets that are starting to blossom and look a little bit better than everything else, considering the current market conditions.
Absolutely, Donnie. Thank you so much for this update. We'll be sure to check in with you again a little later. Right now, we'll hand it back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
All right, guys, thank you for that update. We'll talk to y'all in the second hour here on FreightWaves Now. Right now, we're going to welcome in our Check Call Communities Chair, Mary O'Connell, to get in a little about this week's Communities Update. Mary, thank you for joining us.
Hey guys, I'm happy to be here.
So it is a Tuesday, which means that it is a Check Call Day. We, of course, get the newsletter drop, and we have the show this afternoon as well. Let's start off with our show today. What are we covering topic-wise?
Today in the newsletter, we are covering everyone's absolute favorite topic, non-competes. So some people might have seen that FTC proposed rule that came out to potentially ban and end all non-competes, which, I mean, personally, I love. I'm not a big fan of non-competes. I understand there's a time and a place for certain protections in business, but yeah, we're going to talk about banning non-competes. And for anyone that is so interested, the FTC proposed ruling currently has over 5,300 comments on non-competes. Most of them are against them, but that's a lot.
Mary, one of the things that make you such an amazing 3PL expert is, of course, that you have been in this space and have been in the trenches and in that environment. When it comes to non-competes, have you ever also been impacted by them, been in one? Are you free? Have you been free to kind of just roam and go as you please?
So I have had 2 separate non-competes, and the first one, technically, I got really lucky because my boss at the time, who also had the same non-compete, he left to go to another company, and he went to the other company and was like, "Hey, you should come work here." And I was like, "Okay, great." And so I went to go leave, and I actually had to like legal had to sign off on me leaving because technically I had a non-compete and that was a competitor, but I was a low enough level employee that they were like, she's not really going to do anything, because I wasn't in brokerage anymore at that point in time. I had moved to pricing, and anyone that's in pricing knows that like there's nothing you do in pricing that makes it like super unique. It's pricing. Like, that is what it is. There's no super top secret things that you can take from one company to another. Pricing is what it is.
Non-competes are one of those things that, of course, are fascinating in the industry, and something that, I personally have a very large vested interest in, coming out of the broadcast industry, where non-competes are rampant and often super, super damaging. But we have very concrete proof here in the logistics industry what non-competes can do to your career as well. That's why companies like Steam Logistics are so passionate about fighting them. When we're talking about the support for this FTC ruling, how much of that is backed by individual support? How much of that is backed by company support? And do you think that there is maybe a heavier weight versus one or the other?
So from the comments that I went through, because of course I'm a nerd that sat there the first day that comments were open, and like 300 people submitted comments in the first day, and I read most of them. I think of a majority of the comments, there are very few that are in favor of a non-compete. Seems like a lot of people are, against non-competes because it ultimately negatively impacts their life if they have to go work in a completely other industry, definitely taking a significant pay cut for at least a year or sometimes even 2, so that way they can then come back to the industry they may have 5, 10, 15, 20 years in, just to switch employers, which is completely unfair, but I'll get on that soapbox a different time. But I definitely think that if there's pressure from companies, and large companies, small companies, all companies alike, mixed with individual pressure, that just is more than a sign. That's like a giant sign for anyone that, this is maybe not something that we should be moving forward with, and we should maybe put something else in a place if businesses are worried about customers leaving or something like that. Like a non-solicit, completely fine. I have no problem with that. But also at the same time, if I'm a business, why do I feel like if one person leaves, all of my customers are going to leave? Like, why do I feel like my business and my ability to deliver on what I've promised, like if I feel that, if one person leaves and everyone else is going to leave, maybe I should do a little bit of soul searching and see what it is that I'm so worried about internally here at my business that would cause all of my customers to leave if one person left.
A lot of great points there, Mary. And on the other side, we're looking at a company wanting to protect itself in some way. Where is the balance really hit when you're looking at a company trying to protect some internal sources and maybe processes versus really employers or employees' means of living and just freedom just to work where they want to work?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those, like, it's a very fine line to walk because I see both sides of the coin. I see the point of a non-compete where, you know, the company is literally just trying to protect themselves. That's all they want to do. They want to protect themselves. They want to make sure that they're not going to lose business when someone leaves and that they're not going to lose some fancy proprietary institutional information. I understand that. There's a time and a place for that. And I think that this is where who you hire and how you conduct business is really going to play into it. Because if you hire people that, you know, might be more of a more highly ethical person and someone that, you know, has a higher moral code and isn't necessarily kind of a shyster or a sneaky fox, you'll get a lot farther with that. You'll have the ability to kind of know and trust that person to do the right thing when they leave. Whereas if it's more of a toxic, negative, not super positive work environment, and you get really persnickety when somebody leaves, then I would, then, you know, maybe some of your proprietary information or some of how you do things might go with that person. I think it's just it's a fine line to walk. And I don't think that a non-compete is the answer there. Because, I mean, we have everything from NDAs to non-solicits to a whole bunch of other things that you can come up with. But the one thing that is unique about transportation is, like, there's not a lot of, like, super institutional, like, this is how we do things and no one else does it like this. Like, at the end of the day, we're all moving freight. Yeah, everybody does it differently, and some people might have different resources or more efficient processes to do it, but we're all still moving freight at the end of the day. So I don't feel like there's a lot of top secret proprietary information going around on how people move freight. It's moving freight.
It's moving freight, exactly. So, of course, that's Check Call, our show today. Where can folks go to catch the show, and then what can they do to subscribe to your newsletter?
Yeah, so if you want to catch the show, it comes out today on FreightWaves TV at 12:30. So literally just don't refresh the page. Keep watching. There's a lot of great content that comes out after FreightWaves Now. You can subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/subscribe. You can also just hang out on LinkedIn, because don't worry, I'll post about that there too. And then if you have any spicy questions, just slide into those DMs and hit me with whatever you got. I want to hear your take on a non-compete.
Spicy questions and sneaky foxes. Mary, thanks so much for joining us this morning, and I'm looking forward to today's episode.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
All right, and you can head on over to freightwaves.com, subscribe to Check Call newsletter, and while you're there, might as well hit on the rest of our communities as well. We will feature Point of Sale tomorrow, of course, and then we'll have Loaded and Rolling Thursday. Mary will be back for Running on Ice on Friday morning as well. Don't go away, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more FreightWaves Now.
Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Check Call. Check Call. Check Call. Let's go. Nobody works for free, so why should we be expecting our drivers to? Okay, let's just get it together now. What are some of those proactive steps that you can start taking now? For myself, I would like the Earth to still be here for a little bit longer, but you know, is a hot dog a sandwich?
Oh, okay. Is pizza an open-faced sandwich? It's bread.
I have been ready for this question. I've seen the show.
We're all in this together.
Thanks for making me hungry. Now I want a hot dog.
You're welcome. Catch episodes of Check Call Tuesdays at 12:30 on FreightWaves TV. Keep up with all things Check Call on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation.
This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
And welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for our second weather update of the morning. We're talking about the possibility for some severe storms as well as some heavy rainfall across the southern parts of Louisiana and into the Mississippi River Valley. Looking for today for the rain, tomorrow for the potential severe weather. So let's start off with what we can expect tomorrow. We've got the Storm Prediction Center, which has issued a slight risk of severe weather across the lower Mississippi Valley from about the Jackson area down in through Louisiana. And let's check this out in Sonar Critical Events. It does include the New Orleans metro right now, as well as Jackson, Mississippi, just to the south of Memphis, Tennessee. You do as well get the Mississippi River Valley westward into Arkansas and then into central Louisiana. This is just a slight risk of severe weather right now, but as always, our potential is there for a spin-up tornado or two, strong winds, heavy rainfall, and hail possible coming out of these storms. Before we get there, we're going to be watching the development of some heavy rain across Oklahoma and into Texas. That's going to be driven by a pretty strong cold front right now that's currently bringing snow across the southern parts of the mountain range in New Mexico. The front side of it, on the warm side of the storm, Texas, don't worry, you're going to stay warm through this whole thing. We're going to get some heavy rainfall setting up across the eastern parts of the state, eastward from Dallas up to the western parts of Arkansas, including Fort Smith. So the I-20, I-30 corridors moving east from Dallas need to be wary of this heavy rainfall. And that's what's going to trigger that severe weather potential for tomorrow. Ahead of the heavier rain, we'll see the possibility again for some strong thunderstorms, some possible spin-up tornadoes or two, maybe a little bit of hail, but mostly going to be some heavy rainfall, some potential heavy flooding, as well as the threat for some small hail and those strong winds coming out of these storms. And that's what we're going to be watching for tomorrow. Behind that, more rain is on the way for central Arkansas, but again, all liquid precipitation. Good news after last week and that ice storm that had some pretty major impacts across the area. We'll go ahead and keep a further watch on weather in the second hour of the show. Right now, we're going to toss things back over to Christian, probably for some more bad chemistry jokes with the social roundabout.
Yeah, Kaylee, no more bad chemistry jokes. But did you hear about Oxygen Magnesium? They're totally dating, like OMG. Anyways, I'm Christian Thomas, and I'm sorry for those jokes. That's my last one, I promise. We're going to take a look this time at a TikTok that's going viral for a student who won Principal for a Day. Who would want to be Principal for a Day? Growing up, I know I would have. Unlimited recess, free ice cream, you name it. But this kid, he decided to go all out for his award for Principal for a Day. Let's take a look.
My son won Principal for the Day. I asked him if he wanted to go all out. He said, oh yeah, of course. This is the result.
Oh my gosh! That is going all out. Oh my goodness, you are going all out.
This is
We have never had a principal.
We got close. I got as close as I could. That's awesome.
Here, let's take a quick picture together, guys.
Yes.
Yeah, that kid really went all out for it. And, we need to have an award and do Freightcaster for a Day. And the first recipient needs to be my co-host in Social Roundabout, Isaiah Buchanan. He needs to be Anthony Smith. I doubt he'll shave his head because we all know Isaiah loves his hair. Am I right, Kaylee and Anthony? Do you think he'd shave his head if we got him to be Anthony for a day?
I think that if we pooled enough cash, we can get Isaiah to shave his head and dress up as Anthony for a day.
He might.
What do you think? Let's name your price, Izzy. How much you got?
Also, Christian, I love the jokes. Please keep them coming.
I don't know. All right, Christian, thank you for those updates. We'll talk to you later on in the show. Right now, we're going to toss things to a little conversation about Global Supply Chain Week coming up in just a few days.
It's coming up soon, and the time is almost here. You still have plenty of time to get registered, and registration is absolutely free. And that's going to be coming up February 20th to the 24th. And this is the virtual event of all virtual events. And if you're involved in any part of the supply chain, there is going to be something here for you.
The most exciting thing about this is that we have a list of free giveaways. And most of those things are things that you can use to block out the sound of Christian's bad jokes. We've got some AirPod Maxes, we've got a set of the little Apple Mini speakers. partners. So definitely check that out. As Anthony mentioned, it is free registration, so head on over to live.freightwaves.com and get registered for that event. While you're there, you might as well sign up for the rest of our virtual events as well. Start budgeting your time, budgeting your money for that Future of Supply Chain ticket at the end of June.
That's right. And I'm going to be also looking forward to see who wins some of those grilling accessories and things like that. But we're going to take a short break. First, we're going to show you what's happened in the freight markets of the last 24 hours. And then we're going to go to a short break and hopefully be back with more jokes from Christian and FreightWaves Now. Stay tuned.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
It's a good day coming.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now, starting off our second hour with a 10 a.m. check of your top stories. The benchmark diesel price fell yesterday, following in line with recent declines in futures and wholesale prices. The price was down 8.3 cents per gallon after 2 weeks of back-to-back increases and settled at $4.53. This is about 60 cents higher than the price was this time last year. Diesel markets have completely fallen into restrictions on Russian diesel and other refined products as of Sunday, including a European Union price cap on diesel of $100 a barrel. Intermodal drivers and their companies operating in LA Long Beach, Memphis, Savannah, and Chicago have secured a win against ocean carriers with a decision from the Federal Maritime Commission. The decision rules that exclusive agreements between carriers and chassis providers violate the U.S. Shipping Act when an agreement limits a carrier to not use a chassis of its own choosing. The lawsuit has been in the FMC's hands since August of 2020 and was brought forth by the American Trucking Association's Intermodal Motor Carriers Conference against a national chassis pool operator and 11 ocean carriers. Japanese manufacturer Hino Trucks has appointed its first American-born president and chairman. Glenn Ellis will take over the lead role and will also be an officer of parent company Hino Motors. Ellis has served as Senior Vice President of Customer Experience for the company and oversaw collaboration with Exos Trucks for its battery pack and electric drive system for a Class 8 box truck. The company has a range of zero-emission vehicles, including a Class 5 and a Class 8 tractor. Management from flatbed operator Dasiki says that it expects to see demand improve by the middle of the year, more in line with normal seasonality, and rates returning to their peak 2022 levels next year. The company reported fourth quarter earnings yesterday with an adjusted earnings per share of 25 cents, 6 cents ahead of consensus estimates. It repurchased roughly 30% of its outstanding shares during the quarter, including $108 million from founder Don Dasiki. Adjusted net income was 21% higher year over year, coming in at $15.7 million. And engine maker Cummins posted a strong fourth quarter result with some records for the full year as it integrated billions of dollars in acquisitions. Revenue of $7.8 billion in the quarter was 32.2% higher year over year and $590 million over analyst estimates. Not counting the business and acquisition cost of Mariner, net income for the quarter was $644 million or $4.52 per diluted share. Earnings per share was also in line with analyst expectations. And you can find these stories and so much more on FreightWaves.com as well as on our FreightWaves app. Give us a like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube and a follow on social media as well. And head on over to tv.freightwaves.com for everything else. Right now, we're going to toss things back over to Tony and Donnie at the wall for our next carrier update.
Welcome into this carrier update. Donnie, going to start here in one market we've looked at a lot recently, Kansas City. Seeing an uptick there in the rejection rate, maybe moving up above 4%. Still not in that inflationary pressure where we would think spot rates really start to move higher, but it is a positive sign if you want to look at it from a carrier perspective.
Yeah, and it's just the increase that we're looking at here. We're coming down from, almost nearly 3.5% moving upwards. And it's just, this is one of the ones that was on the most volatile markets page where we're seeing signs of improvement.
Yep.
So again, and like I say, we've looked at this. I want to use it again in today's lanes of the day because it's one of the stronger markets that we have out there. You'll find a lot of the markets that are the strongest markets for dry van right now are in the Midwest. Memphis on the line there, but Memphis, Kansas City, Chicago, Indianapolis, in that area is really where you probably need to be keeping your trucks right now that are showing the best rates, spot rates, shall we say.
Yep.
So if you have a higher exposure to spot rates right now, you probably need to keep your trucks in the Midwest. But let's change gears here and go to the next chart. We talked about this yesterday just a little bit. This is our van contract initial reporting and our reefer contract initial reporting. If we step back here before 2020, let's call this what we would call maybe a normal market pre-COVID, as best we can call what a normal market is. And we see reefer here in yellow running about 20 cents higher than your dry van contract rates. We go into COVID here, and of course, we have a big demand for dry van freight. And it really pulls the spot rates up, and these contracted way up as demand for dry van takes off. Delayed was reefer, and reefer takes off a little bit later here. Now, everybody's talking about this normalization. That's a word that we keep hearing over and over. Are we normal right now? And my answer is no, we're not. We are normalizing, which is what everybody keeps trying to say. And the reason I say that is if we look right back here, if that is normal, reefer are more expensive, is more expensive equipment.
Yep.
They're normally a little bit more. Should this be back above this? I would think so. But over the last few months, we've seen this gap start closing and getting closer and closer together. Now we're at 8 cents.
Yeah.
So I would think here over the next month and a half, possibly by April 1st, that this may swap.
Yep.
And then we'll need this to climb back a little bit higher. Now, where will that happen at? Or along in here? Will it happen at 225? Will it happen at 205? I would say it's going to be a little bit lower than this, but somewhere maybe hopefully above where we were back in 2019, that we'll see dry van drop back down and then a reefer be steadily right back above it. And what we see past this would again look like this right over here.
Yeah, that's the question that remains is where does it happen? Not if it's going to happen, because I think just given how much that gap's compressed from even July of last year, that compression in that gap, we're going to see an inversion back to what we were at. It's just a matter of where.
Yeah, when we come back, we'll look at some lanes today, Tony, and see what happens to those Kansas Cities and Memphis markets.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Donnie, so much for this update. We'll be sure to check in with you again one more time before the end of the show. Right now, we'll hand it back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
All right, guys, thank you for that carrier update. Right now, we're going to welcome in our next live guest. We've got Ellen Voie joining us, who is, of course, the head of the Women in Trucking Association, to give us a little bit of an update about what's going on in the near future. Ellen, thanks for joining us. We are excited to have you.
Got so much going on this year. It's just crazy, but a lot of things coming up in March.
And Ellen, let's jump straight into it. So what are going to be some of the big things that we're looking for in the upcoming month here?
So we all know that Louisville, Kentucky is the home of the Mid-America Trucking Show, the largest trucking show in North America. And so we always hold our salute to women behind the wheel at that event where we honor female professional drivers. And this year, we've got something special. We're giving away a truck donated by Aero Truck Sales. And so the date is March 31st. And it's in the South Wing, which is up in the second floor. So you just go up the escalator. And we'll have chocolate fountains, we'll have speakers, we'll have lots of fun events. We give everyone a red shirt. We always take a big photo of the whole group. And it's just really to honor our female professional drivers. And we'll have our big cake as well, the cake in the shape of a truck. So it'll be lots of food, fun, and just a great way to get together again once a year.
I love that. And seeing the photo from Matt's is one of my favorite things to come out of the truck shows, really for the entire year. When you're talking a little bit about this celebration for the female drivers, how many female drivers do we typically see participating in this? And what type of proportion does that represent from our overall driver industry?
Well, there's about 180 to 200,000 female professional drivers. And the reason we hold this at the Mid-American Trucking Show is because they're already there. Not all of them, of course, but and we've switched it to Friday because we used to hold it on Saturday, but then it coincided with the Truck Beauty Contest Awards, so we would lose some of them. So it'll be Friday this time. We'll see. But we usually get a couple hundred. Our very first year, we were trying to break the world's record set in the Netherlands, I believe it was 417. They had 417 female drivers in one place, and we've never broken that record. I'd love to do it. So everybody come. It doesn't cost you a dime. You just stop at our booth in the atrium, sign up. We'll give you a T-shirt, and you can come, and we have lots of prizes and giveaways, and it's just a lot of fun.
It sounds like it's going to be a blast. And Ellen, what other events are we looking at this year? And also, I hear there's a really big award that will be put out at some point as well.
That's right. I didn't even mention that. We announced our Driver of the Year at the Salute to Women Behind the Wheel, and we're still in the judging process, so we have not come up with the finalists for that yet. But we will announce our driver of the year, along with giving away the Aero truck. That'll be so much fun. I keep saying I get to hand the keys to someone, but it's keyless entry. So I'm not even handing the keys to someone who wins the truck because it'll be on their phone. But our driver of the year, sponsored by Walmart, will be announced at the event as well. And then we have one other event, our Distinguished Woman in Logistics, and that is still open until February 20th if someone wants to nominate someone. And the winner will be announced at the TIA, the Transportation Intermediaries Association event. They call it their Capital Ideas Conference on April 21st in Orlando, Florida. So we have lots of recognition programs so that we can tell their stories and highlight them and honor them. So that will be announced. Distinguished Woman in Logistics at TIA in April, but the Driver of the Year will be announced March 31st in Louisville.
And I love the Distinguished Woman in Logistics Award as well, because I think that it gets out of that driver-centric idea, which of course is so valuable, but breaks into the other aspects of supply chain and women who are making incredible contributions. Can you touch a little bit on last year's winner for us? I was at the TIA conference when it was announced, and I was super thrilled. I know women in the room were also thrilled, but touch a little bit on last year's winner.
So Nicole Glenn of Candor Expedite, and she spoke at our conference. So if you were at the conference, you heard her speak, but just an amazing woman who she is the CEO, the founder of Candor Expedite, and they're a growing logistics organization. And Kaylee, I'm glad that you mentioned that this is a good way to recognize that women in trucking isn't just women in trucks. We're women in the industry, and logistics is such a big part of supply chain. So acknowledging that Distinguished Woman in Logistics is part of Women in Trucking also helps us make people aware that, again, we're not just about drivers, we're about all women in the industry. In fact, Kaylee, you're a woman in trucking.
I definitely agree with that statement. And I love that you make that announcement at the TIA conference, because I think there is still this idea that a brokerage floor is run by men, and that brokerage, which is of course TIA's main group, is very centered on this kind of like salesy, like it's still kind of a little stereotypical, right? And so I love that we have this little piece. I was at the TIA conference last year, as I mentioned, and got to hang out not only with Nicole after her award win, but also during the Women in 3PL's, the networking lunch that was there. So super valuable for people who want to come and make sure that they're getting the value out of both your show at Matt's and now the presence at TIA. What does that look like? What would you recommend them doing to get the most value out of coming to these types of shows?
Well, first of all, I'd say go to the websites and find out what activities and what time everything will happen. So like our event at the Salute to Women Behind the Wheel will be, I think it starts at 4 o'clock. 4:30 to 6, but we'll open the doors at 3:30. So I would say come, but look at the website in advance, just see what will be happening and when and what time, and then plan your day around that. And the same for the TIA. And by the way, it's sponsored by Truck Stop. And the very first Distinguished Woman in Logistics, Christy Nickel, from Nickel Logistics, is on the board of TIA. So it is changing. Logistics are becoming more of, there's more and more women in that area as well.
And Ellen, right now we're talking about events, but you are busy with webinars as well, and that's another great resource. Can you talk about some of the upcoming webinars you're hosting?
Oh boy, that's an area that I don't manage, so I can't really tell you. I know we just had one. Well, we just had one on mentoring, and that was very valuable and very well received. But my team does that one, but we have one every month. So I would just say, check our website, and if you're a member, you can look at past webinars as well.
Absolutely. And then to wrap it all up, Ellen, we know that we touched a little bit the last time you were on about the career transition and the incredible person who is coming in to take your role in leadership of women in trucking. How are you feeling moving in now to what'll be the last Mid-America Trucking Show, your last Salute to Women Behind the Wheel leading it? How are you feeling? A little nostalgic, a little sad?
I'm going to miss everybody, but I'm not going away. I'll still be the founder, and the transition actually happens at our annual meeting, March 16th, and that's when Jennifer Hedrick will become the CEO. So I'm still the CEO until March 16th, but then I'm staying until July 1st on the payroll as founder. So I'll still be with Women in Trucking. And then even after, I'll still be doing some speaking, and I'll still be getting out there. So the transition will be kind of in pieces over the long period of time.
It's great to hear that you'll still be very much active in the industry, because we definitely need you around. And when you're looking at, of course, some of the big events, I want to get too ahead of myself. We also have Accelerate coming up at the very end of the year, towards the end of the year. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, actually, and last year we had 1,750 registered attendees, so we're prepared to have up to 3,000, and the facility can hold it. And I asked, everyone keeps saying, well, what are we going to do to honor Ellen for starting Women in Trucking? And I said, you know what? I want a retirement party at Accelerate. I want to party and have fun and just celebrate with all of my friends and attendees. And so I think that's in the works. That's what I asked for. So I'll know more, because I said, don't keep it a secret. You can't keep secrets around here. But I plan on having a big retirement party at the Accelerate conference in November. And I hope everyone comes, because it's going to be bigger and better than any other conference we've ever had.
Definitely looking forward to that conference, and also looking forward to potentially running into you. I think we'll both be in New Orleans in a few days here at the upcoming conference for the CLDA.
Actually, you're right. I have a 5:30 flight tomorrow morning to get to New Orleans. I hate those early flights, but I will be down in New Orleans, so I'll say hey.
Awesome. Looking forward to catching up with you there, and thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you both for having me, and you guys have a wonderful week.
You as well. Right now, we're going to go back over to the wall. We have Kaylee next with another weather update.
All right, Anthony, thank you for that. Looking at the next little area of winter weather that's impacting just a small part of the Mountain West, but enough to cause possibly some traffic issues along the I-25 corridor across central New Mexico. And you can see we've got a decent amount of snowfall going on from just north of the Albuquerque area, so between Albuquerque and Santa Fe. That stretches kind of right along the central axis of I-25 down through the interstate just to the southern parts of the state. So we do have winter weather advisories as well as up towards the Santa Fe area. It does include also some portions of Interstate 40 moving through Grants into Gallup. And with this, we'll see some on and off periods of heavy snowfall moving through these areas. So drivers moving through just need to be cautious of, as they're driving, potentially hitting some of that snowfall. Same thing as you stretch eastward into the I-40 area, moving across the New Mexico border on into Texas. Just to the west of Amarillo, we could see some heavier snowfall setting up as well. Overall accumulations in those lower elevations and on the roadways not going to be too impactful from this, maybe a dusting to about an inch. But up in the higher elevations, some of those mountain passes, we could again see some pretty decent accumulation, about 2.5 to 3 inches on the grassy surfaces, and maybe just a dusting on the roadways. Temperatures here, not super cold, so not expecting any icing with it as well, but could just be enough to cause some visibility issues. The colder piece of the storm is going to stay well to the west of the Dallas-Fort Worth metro, so they don't have to worry about any more ice or winter weather coming their way as they continue to recover from the winter storm that impacted them last week. We just have rain stretching up across central Oklahoma and into central Texas as well. We'll get one more check of the weather before we are done here for the morning. Right now, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with Research Corner in just a few minutes. The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation. This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
Welcome to Drilling Deep. I'm your host, John Kingston. Drilling Deep is the place where we talk about oil and we talk about diesel, and you have to drill to get oil and you have to get oil to make diesel, so that's why we call it Drilling Deep. Drilling Deep drops every Friday on FreightWaves TV and all available podcast platforms.
Welcome into this week's edition of the Research Corner. I'm Tony Mulvey, joined by Joe Antashak. Joe, how's it going this morning?
It's going great, Tony. How you doing?
You know, I cannot complain. I'm here, and it's honestly one of my favorite times of the year because as a guy who studies the stock market and things like that, really getting into what's going on in the research, in the investment side and the earnings from these companies, really get to see where we are in the cycle. We get management commentary, which is always valuable because these are the leaders that are in the space. They can provide that commentary that's so valuable to what they're thinking, what they're seeing, and we can compare it to kind of our data here at FreightWaves. And one of the data sources we look at a lot that comes out of these earnings reports is from Landstar. It's their BCO data, because it kind of gives insight to owner-operator thinking, those leased on, so Landstar with their business capacity owners, those leased on owner-operators for their business model. We like to look at the changes in there, and we've got a chart pulled up here. It's that quarter-over-quarter change in BCOs. What we see is the volatility in it has become extremely more volatile in the past 3-4 years, which I don't think is a surprise given the freight market. But what's interesting is in the fourth quarter, that quarter-over-quarter change was the fastest decline in BCOs leaving Landstar dating back to 2010. I mean, Joe, when you look at this, what do you think when you see that drop in BCOs quarter-over-quarter?
Yeah, well, you know, I think the rate of the drop is what's surprising, but the fact that there is a drop is not. I mean, they reported that loads hauled via truck were down about 5.5% year over year for Q4, and then revenue per load decreased 7%, right, compared to Q4. So it's like the loads aren't there, the money's not there, so it makes sense that these BCOs would be dropping out, right? Now, what was pretty interesting to me was that their actual they said that the total truck capacity on their platform grew 7% year over year. So that is somewhat interesting, right? It's not like this capacity is just disappearing from their platform. It's still there. It's just in kind of a different form.
Yeah, and the way we think about this BCO, it's kind of an insight to the owner ops mindset, right? When you see an increase in the BCOs quarter over quarter market, if you look at it and line it up with the trucking cycles that we've seen, when we've seen positive growth quarter over quarter, the market has been in this inflationary environment. You've seen rates go up. There's incentive for drivers to go out on their own, and they do that by going to Landstar and becoming an owner-operator, leasing on with them. But conversely, when the market softens, you see them leave, flow back into the umbrella of a larger carrier or under a forced dispatch model, things like that, where you're seeing, and you're kind of seeing that, and you've seen it now. This is the third consecutive quarter we've seen a decline quarter over quarter. I think the interesting part in this is the rate being the fastest that it's been, right? I mean, even compared to 2018, 2019, I mean, we only got down to about 2% decline quarter over quarter at the worst of those times. Now we're over 3% down quarter over quarter. I think what's interesting is this the bottom and we start to move up from here. I think that's going to be the key. But I don't know. I mean, that's going to be what's interesting. This is kind of that gauge to measure how fast, if you want to gauge it, capacity is leaving the market. But it's not a perfect one, especially because it is lagged. I mean, this is data obviously coming from the fourth quarter, but what we'll see is how that reacts as we move throughout this year, especially with their management commentary saying they believe in trucking cycles. They believe it's that 12 to 18-month cycle. If that's the case, basically, if you want to take 18 months starting in Q3, that's where things start to turn back up. If you consider Q1 of 2020, that peak to bottom being 18 months, you're starting early Q3 with that upswing. Other company we want to talk about, C.H. Robinson, obviously the largest freight brokerage in the country. Really kind of this disappointing quarter. I think one thing to call out here is that their gross margin percentage, will pull up a chart, stayed flat quarter over quarter at 14.1%. I think that's kind of a surprise. I mean, obviously a lot of their miss on the earnings front stemmed from their global forwarding section that was relatively weak. And when you look at what's happened in the ocean market, not really a surprise to see that, especially given spot rates have come down, 80, 90% from their peak earlier in the year. I think some of this, Joe, I mean, maybe we saw obviously changes in management there, obviously still going over the interim CEO into finding a permanent one. But I mean, do you think that global forwarding side is really what stemmed or what caused a management change there?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, and it, for my money, I have to imagine that has to be a part of it, right? I mean, we talk at FreightWaves a lot about this idea that has global trade peaked, like this idea of globalization, and it's like now there's a lot more interest in nearshoring, both geopolitically and environmentally, and I think that you see this in C.H. Robinson's global forwarding division, right? Where, I mean, the adjusted gross profit for both ocean and air is like dramatically off, right? I mean, it's 40 to 50% for both. And that's where their real pain points are, at least in this last quarter's results. Their truck brokerage was okay. Adjusted gross profits were actually up. But anyway, Biesterfeld, potentially that shakeup is a result of kind of a strategic shift, perhaps, maybe away from global forwarding. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it seemed like for quarters and years, really, that global forwarding arm was that growth arm, that lever that the management team was trying to pull. And all of a sudden, when things softened in that market, it was a lever that ultimately snapped. So, Joe, thank you so much for joining me today on this week's Research Corner. Right now, we'll take a quick break. We'll be back with more FreightWaves Now.
Hey everybody, this is Thomas Watson, enterprise trucking carrier expert here at FreightWaves, telling you about my show, Loaded and Rolling. Now, it involves trucking topics for large carriers and even small ones that wish to be large. Anything that impacts trucking, you can get it there. You can catch us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern on tv.freightwaves.com. We do it live.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June. And welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for our final check of weather for your Tuesday morning. We're moving back out to the Pacific Northwest as we've got more onshore flow bringing some heavy rainfall and some mountain snow back to the areas, although nothing like that incredible atmospheric river that's set up to start off the year. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. We can see right now we've got the radar turned on again, looking at the northern parts of Washington, southern parts of Vancouver. We've got some pretty heavy rainfall moving into the Seattle area across the Olympic Peninsula today. Because of that, we've got flood watches in place for the Olympic Peninsula down to the Olympia area. Tacoma and Seattle are excluded from that flood watch, but we could be expecting about 2.5 to 3 inches of total rain for the actual city centers of Seattle, Tacoma for today and into tomorrow. And then, of course, the mountain ranges right out to their east. We do have winter weather advisories in place because that upslope flow going to be producing some heavy snowfall across the area. That does include the I-90 corridors as you move to the east out of Seattle. Chain restrictions are in place for these areas still, as they will remain through the rest of the winter. So just make sure you're being careful out there. But once you clear the mountains onto the east side of those mountains, the east side of the range, we're looking at not too bad of conditions along the interstate. As far as that goes, farther down to the south, we do have, again, some more rainfall filtering in through the Portland area. Again, winter weather advisories for those mountains just to the east of the cities. And then down into California, some lingering wintry weather across the higher elevations. Rain for the Monterey Bay area has receded and moved up to the north, so they're dealing with some more time to recover from some ongoing flood issues. But again, the mountain ranges to the east of Sacramento and Fresno going to be picking up some snow. Same thing with I-80 moving through the mountains of California and into the Reno, Nevada area. Possibly some snowfall on the ground for you guys as well. Basically, the main weather concern through the Pacific Northwest is going to be up just to the west of Seattle in the Olympic Peninsula with the potential flooding issues. Other than that, just some nice beneficial rainfall out there out west. That does it for your weather today. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about more weather across the country. Right now, we're going to toss things back over to Christian Thomas for a final social roundabout.
Thanks, Kaylee, for those updates today. And no, I'm not going to tell any jokes this time, I promise. Bill would get irritated with me. Anyways, we're going to take a look at this video. Guinness's World Record, oldest dog alive. Take a look at this. Little Bobby. Bobby, as of today, is 30 years old, 272 days. That's a pretty old dog right there, especially for the type of dog he is. It's estimated that they live from 12 to 14 years. And his owner, who lives out in a rural village in Portugal, has had him his whole life. And he talked about how he feeds him human food. Maybe that's the goal to life there, is to stay alive, is to eat human food. Luckily, I eat human food every day, but who knows how long I'll be here. Anyways, that does it for this social roundabout. We're gonna go to the round table.
And welcome into the roundtable. Bill Priestley here with you. And the pandemic has affected, obviously, us in ways we didn't really even fathom when it possibly came to us. And obviously, freight was no exception to that. We're going to take a look at how the pandemic and the current economic recession or freight recession has impacted freight overall. Joining us, Lauren Began, new maritime professor, as well as Thomas Wasson, our enterprise trucking expert here as well. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Lauren, I'm going to start with you. This discussion was basically precipitated by a post that you had put up on LinkedIn, where it was quoted by the Hapag-Lloyd CEO, Haben Jensen. The party is over, that we now have to work for getting cargo onto our ships from here on out. I want to ask you this question because it's been burning in my mind ever since I saw this. We at FreightWaves reported middle of last year, of course, that ocean volumes were going to fall off a cliff, and indeed they did. It precipitated, of course, the current economic situation that we are in now. Trucking obviously took a major hit through that as well. Why is Haben Jensen saying the party is over now, as opposed to an action that precipitated this thing happened, almost 12 months ago?
Yeah, I mean, if you follow some of the reporting here, and thanks for having me, Bill. So if you follow some of the reporting here, there's always going to be a lag between the contract rates and the spot rates. And so we've seen the spot rates come down, and that's the cliff that everybody was talking about. And that happened end of summer, the fall. But, because of some of the contracted rates, the carriers were actually still enjoying really big profits. I mean, we've even seen some reports recently saying that some of these companies, I believe Hapag-Lloyd was one of them, are still pulling in millions, if not billions of dollars of profits. And so what was normal business shipping is that the carriers did have to fight for space and for cargo really to go on their vessels. That's what precipitated alliances to begin with, was that a better way to kind of combo the available cargo out there. So, I think he's right that the party's over, but I don't think that shippers should get too confident just yet.
Okay, all right. Thomas, trucking obviously had its own kind of reaction to this entire thing. How do you see it in terms of as it saw the quote-unquote bloodbath coming and how it's reacted to it? Obviously, spot rates have hit the floor.
Well, I think it's thank you for having me on, Bill, of course. And it's real fascinating to watch because the United States imports a lot of the volumes overseas. Container imports also drive truckload demand. So, we're in a situation where as consumers were buying more, the narrative, of course, was that we had more volumes coming up and there just was not enough truckload supply. Working for the money is such a great term because that's exactly what trucking is having to deal with right now as well. Kind of the reckoning where back before during the middle of 2021, as well as early part of 2022, you really didn't have to work very hard to make really crazy profits. It didn't really allow certain responsibility and decision making for trucking carriers. And now, we're seeing a similar situation with normalization of rates, normalization of consumer demand for goods versus services. And it's opening up this whole door where, similar to shipping, except minus the alliances, of course, this highly competitive transportation segment is going to go through a correcting phase. And, the contracted rates on trucking and with shipping can have some similarities in that both of them have that lag time. That's what we're hearing from trucking CEOs. Fourth quarter now, just wait till you hear the first quarter Q1 23 results, and then we'll start probably seeing some rhetoric about hoping for a thawing out of the spring. But that's the challenge for shippers. I think it was a great point earlier brought up. If you're a shipper, when do you know when you're in the trough and when do you know if it's going to go back up? It's really hard to predict.
Let's take a look at the three charts that we had to pull up here. The first is the inbound ocean shipments that have come through, and you're going to also see the NTI, which is the green line, and the volumes that are coming through as the blue. The NTI is going to remain the same in the second chart, which is the import TEUs, and then again, the number three chart we've got is the Baltic Daily Index. And I think if you look at all these three kind of coercively, except for possibly this one, I want to come back to this one a little bit later. If you took maybe 30 or 60-day averages, you would have essentially the same curve going across in that arc across the stream, going up and then coming back down. With that, Lauren, why has it stayed so consistently the same? Obviously, there are lots of other things that have gone into this, especially on the shipping side where you had OSRA come through, and also you had a great migration from West Coast to East Coast, which surely must have affected rates in some way.
Story here is just consumer demand. I mean, we saw consumer demand take a new wave of people didn't go out for dinner anymore because they weren't allowed out of their house. And so they bought stuff. And so they were sitting around their living rooms looking at the rug saying, oh God, I hate this rug, or oh, this couch sucks. And so all of a sudden people were buying things that otherwise were kind of periodic, maybe every 5, 10, 20 years. We're kind of all buying these large items at the same time, TVs, and so we saw this run on demand of just imports. We were sitting around, not just unnecessary. A couch is necessary, but we also saw like necessities. We saw toilet paper. We saw paper towels. I know I keep a stack of the Clorox bleach wipes throughout the COVID cycle. So, so I think that the demand was different. And so we saw that as the demand went up, kind of the more intense COVID got, the more we stayed in that world. And the more that the world started to open back up, we saw people going out to dinner. And so the spending shifted from Amazon packages or Walmart or wherever you're buying from, furniture stores, to now going out for dinner more, having some more of that discretionary services spending instead of just goods. And so that's why I think we see a lot of consistency across the board there. The small little changes might have been due to, East Coast having more import. There's a bunch of different things that'll affect those rates, but really comparative to the demand, it just wasn't the same.
Gotcha. But Thomas, let me go back to that third chart that we had pulled up there momentarily. Obviously, the first two were pretty consistent in terms of what they were saying. Were you surprised by seeing the green line do what it did versus what the blue line did?
Well, I mean, I think so. The NTI, we started pulling it in 2019. That's where you see the cutoff. But I think it really illustrates just the point of, trucking. You're going to see this run up, and it does take time. Just like contract rates take time to get renegotiated. Spot rates are such a great indicator because it's almost the pulse of what's going on right now. So, 3 bouts of stimulus in the middle of COVID. Really supercharged consumers that want to buy. And being a trucking expert, you almost have to keep your pulse on the macro economy just to get your weather forecast. Like I'm in Chattanooga right now, there's some clouds. In 24 to 48 hours, we're going to potentially have rain. It's a similar kind of thing when we're talking about ocean-going flows as well as, what's coming out of China. So what surprised me most was how much of a leading indicator it is. You saw that on the index on how prices had started drastically going up, but you're also going to see spot rates move up because shipping is not the only portion of the truckload, supply chain. When we're talking about the freight industry, imports and shipping is one big portion of it. But we also are seeing, there's industrials. We still manufacture things. We see cross-border movements that may not be covered, inbound, outbound from Mexico and Latin American countries. And so it's kind of the canary in the coal mine. I think this chart just shows it the same way that when we saw this run up on demand come in advance, spot rates reflected it. When we saw this downward movement, we're shifting in down gear now. Spot rates were the first to drop as well. So, it's look at it like a weather report. When you see spot rates doing something really, really weird, you can expect other things downstream or upstream across the economy to start making some movements in the coming weeks. So I think it's a 60 to 90 day indicator, at least from spot to contract typically. So we can also expect movements on contract rates following that spot.
Lauren, we got about 2 minutes left here. Give me your sense of, obviously now if the quote-unquote party is over, if you will, do shippers and carriers have different strategies now to try and, granted, not necessarily make ends meet because they're going to be making a lot of money anyway, but how are they going to change strategies now that the playing field is a little bit more even?
I think that they definitely are. So we're going to find out more coming out of the spring negotiations for contract rates, what contract rates for the immediate are going to look like. But really, carriers are moving into a cost savings. When we kind of went through 2008, 2009, 2010, really leading up to the creation of alliances, which was around 2013, 2014, they were in a bad spot, the carriers. They really, they were trying to make ends meet. There were some years that they were just trying to break even. Imagine that. These carriers that have enjoyed billions of dollars were trying to break even a few of those years. And we saw at least one carrier go out of business during that time. And there was a whole, oh man, they're too big to fail. Well, they can fail. And so for a long time, we were trying to figure out what to do with these empty-handed boxes that were just abandoned because they went bankrupt. So I think that this is an interesting time. This is going to be one to watch. I love that analysis with the weather and kind of predicting what's to come. Remember, 90% of everything comes by ocean shipping and 100% arguably comes by trucking. So if 90% of everything that we kind of use, consume, eat is coming through ocean shipping, I think that that's a pretty good indicator of what's maybe to be coming on the grander scale, on the macro of the trucking industry. But, I think that the shippers, it's a long-term plan, right? It's the long game here. Mm-hmm. Keep those relationships, make sure that you're kind of staying in good graces. A lot of shippers feel scorned by the past few years. You got to kind of move forward if you still want to keep working in this supply chain ecosystem.
Laura, let me cut you off there because I've only got about 15 seconds left here. Thomas, if the party is over for shipping, where is trucking right now?
Surviving. Winter has come, and let's hope they manage to save up enough backwards cash, kind of like a squirrel stockpiling acorns. Let's hope there's something for them to have in spring, because right now is the point where you want to batten down the hatches and just control costs.
Gotcha. Lauren and Thomas, thanks so much for joining us on this roundtable. All right, we'll take a short break. We'll be back right after this.
2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
Welcome to Drilling Deep. I'm your host, John Kingston. Drilling Deep is the place where we talk about oil and we talk about diesel, and you have to drill to get oil and you have to get oil to make diesel, so that's why we call it Drilling Deep. Drilling Deep drops every Friday on FreightWaves TV and all available podcast platforms.
And welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for a final check of your headlines this morning. Management from flatbed operator Desiki said it expects to see demand improve by the middle of the year, more in line with normal seasonality, with rates returning to peak 2022 levels next year. The company reported fourth quarter earnings yesterday with an adjusted earnings per share of 25 cents, 6 cents ahead of consensus estimates. It repurchased roughly 30% of its outstanding shares during the quarter, including $108 million worth from founder Don Desiki. Adjusted net income was 21% higher year over year, coming in at $15.7 million. Engine maker Cummins posted a strong fourth quarter result with some records for the full year as it integrated billions of dollars in acquisitions. Revenue of $7.8 billion on the quarter came in 32.2% higher year over year and $590 million over analyst estimates. Not counting the businesses and acquisition cost of Meritor, net income for the quarter was $644 million or $4.52 per diluted share. Earnings per share was in line with analyst expectations. And Burrell Aviation, the startup offering cash-strapped secondary airports a private sector financing option to convert their operations for cargo use, has tapped the leadership of a former sales chief at Southwest Airlines Cargo to attract air freight subtenants. Burrell is also considering starting up an express regional airline to round out its service offerings aimed at logistics companies. Dave Hinderland will join the company after nearly 20 years in cargo sales at Southwest as chief commercial officer. He will be tasked with bringing in business necessary to make their infrastructure projects actually viable. And you can find those stories and more by heading on over to FreightWaves.com and logging into our FreightWaves app. If you're watching us on YouTube, if it's live or on demand, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to stay updated, and head on over to tv.freightwaves.com for anything that you might have missed during this week. That's it for our headlines today. Right now, we're going to toss things back over to the wall. We have our last carrier update.
Welcome into this final carrier update of the morning. Donnie got our lanes of the day. We'll pull it up here, starting one of those markets we talked about, Memphis, looking there.
Yep, so first of all, turn my NCID on here.
Yep.
This is what we show as a trend. That's what we had the purpose of the NTID. So you're going to see this a lot, and this is what we're trying to fight. I don't want to find these lanes that are 245. I'm trying to stay above that. It's getting more and more difficult as you see this line progress down. So remember, you'll see this a lot in a lot of these lanes. So we throw in here Memphis, Tennessee to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I've got it on drive-in. And as we hit our search the lane here, we see that it did trend down, but it started to come back up just a little bit. We're breaking the trend. We're at $2.77. This could be where we saw that change in Memphis, where rejection rates are pushing up a little bit. Tender lead times are extending a little bit. And you'll find some lanes where maybe we can kind of get that those rates up just a little bit. The range, 253 to 294 with a confidence score of 3. So just a little bit of volatility in there.
Yeah, and I mean, even I look at that on that low end, right? That 33%, that range. I mean, it's still above the NTI, the NTID, which is a positive sign, because even on the low end, you're still going to get a rate that is better than the national average, which...
Hit our double arrows here and turn this around. Coming back now, well, what's good one direction may not be near as good as the other. So here, we see the downward trend. It come back up just a little bit. It's already kind of gone down a little bit to $2.18 a mile. So you can run out at 277, come back at 218. Your average rate per mile is right there around that NTID. So in this, it kind of averages out around that, 245, 250 rate per mile range. So still a decent lane because it's I-40 straight across. You're running in some of the cheapest areas to buy fuel. So you can still be profitable on this lane as long as you definitely get the timing right for that 468-mile run.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's go up a little bit further into the Midwest here. Let's go Memphis back up to Chicago. Chicago being one of the strongest markets for spot freight right now. And again, you see where the trend is exactly the same. So this is falling down as 244. So it's right there in line with the NTID. Range 229 to 261. It's a little bit longer of a trip at 533 miles. Let's turn this around here though right quick and see what going back is coming out of Chicago. Again, it's at 251, trend almost the exact same. And here it's come back up just a little bit, a few cents over the past couple of days. So again, you're right in line between this Memphis and Chicago. Not much change. The trends are all pretty well panning up to line up with what we show you every day on the NTI.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the interesting things here is if you look back too, right? I mean, we're talking December, November, January, or October. We're talking, this rate was above the NTI. If you look at the reversal at Memphis to Chicago, it was below. So, I mean, those trends continue to hold true as well. It's not like you're seeing this complete change in what's above and what's below.
All right. Very good. Let's do one more real quick. You just got a few seconds left here. Let's do Kansas City out to Chicago, Illinois, out to Kansas City. You see it falling down here. It's bounced back just a little bit, but still holding pretty strong here at $2.80. Reverse that lane here right quick, and we're coming back at 228. Again, right there around that NTI, Tony.
Thank you so much for the updates this morning, Donnie. We'll be sure to check in with you again tomorrow. Right now, we'll hand it back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
All right, guys, thank you for that. And we are done here for your Tuesday morning on FreightWaves Now. But as always, lots more content coming up throughout the rest of the day. Starting things off with Put That Coffee Down. Kevin Hill will be here in just about an hour to give you an update on the sales world of logistics.
That's right. And you heard from Mary O'Connell earlier this morning, and she'll be right back on FreightWaves TV not too long after that with Check Call as well. And while we're waiting for those shows to pop up, you can also get registered for our next virtual event.
Absolutely. You can head on over to live.freightwaves.com. Go ahead and get registered for our Global Supply Chain Week. We've got a 3-day slate, February 21st through the 23rd, of incredible content. I'm super excited to be hosting the keynote for our Day 2 Food and Beverage, CPG, Retail, and E-commerce Day. Speaking with the folks from HelloFresh. It's going to be an awesome keynote, so make sure that you go ahead and get registered for that. Alongside that, we also have a handful of live shows that will be happening every single day as well. What the Truck, Put That Coffee Down, Loaded and Rolling, and Persona.
That's right. So get registered, get eligible for some of those giveaways, and of course, stay tuned because we have plenty more content coming up. And of course, we'll be back tomorrow morning with more FreightWaves Now.
come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.